You never know how these things are gonna go. Sometimes you sit down, the technology works like that. Other
Okay, what
times,
just
but
happened? All the attendees disappeared. Is that?
uh-uh.
Huh. Oh, no. Oh,
Yeah,
here they come. Maybe. I don't know. There were more and now okay.
uh-uh. Maybe they saw me.
Starting to come in. Well, it is 6:30, so um, others might come in a little late, but why don't we get started?
Okay.
Um, Good evening, everybody. Um, I'm Tammy Gaskell. I'm the chair of the Columbia County Libraries Association and the director of the Rojan Library. I'm here tonight to welcome Jeff Urbin from the FDR Presidential Library and Museum, who will be talking to us about baseball in this opening month of baseball season. Um, Jeff has been doing a number of history programs with us. This is the third of a series of four. Our last one will be in May. I believe it's May 5th. It's the first Monday in May. And it will be on FDR as a hobbyist. I know he had many hobbies, including, I mean, if you've been to the house, you'll see the stuffed birds. I know he was a stamp collector. I'm sure there were probably other things as well. So join us in May for the final program of this series. Right now, I'm just going to turn it over to Jeff. And if you have questions as we go along, please either put them in the chat or in the Q&A, and we will address those at the end of the presentation. So take it away, Jeff.
So I see the first thing in the chat. Hey there, Karen. How are you? And yeah, I'm all warmed up. I got my gear here, my equipment, and thank goodness it's finally baseball season, and thank goodness it's finally getting warm and nice out. Right? What a difference today is from like 48 hours ago. If I get my hands on that woodchuck, there's going to be trouble. Or what was the groundhog, whatever. So there you are. So anyway, tonight we're talking about presidents and baseball, and of course, baseball, the great American pastime, and a game that really has a great deal to do with presidential history. So I want to start off with some presidential baseball facts, give you a list of those, and then we'll talk a little bit about FDR and baseball particularly, and then we'll talk about some of the presidents that have come after that. Now, in terms of baseball and the presidency, it all began in 1892, right? So over 100 years ago, when President Harrison was the first to attend a Major League Baseball game. Okay, so a Major League Baseball game. There may have been presidents that had attended other little baseball games along the way, but he was the first to attend a Major League Baseball game. Then in 1897, President McKinley was invited to toss out the first ball, but he didn't show up. So he missed the opportunity to be the first president to throw out the first ball. In 1907, good old Teddy Roosevelt, a member of the Roosevelt family, but from that other branch, Oyster Bay, was given a golden ticket to attend every game. And so the idea of that basically is a season ticket, we would call today, but he had the golden ticket. 1908, a year later, Teddy Roosevelt invited the Highlanders to the White House, and the Highlanders later became, anybody know who the Highlanders later became? Want to type it in the chat? There's bragging rights, no prize, just bragging rights. Give you a minute to think or Google it. No Googling, hey, that's cheating. None of that. I don't see anything coming in. Everybody must be scratching their heads. All right, so I'm going to give it to you. Teddy Roosevelt invited the Highlanders to the White House, and the Highlanders later became the Yankees. Okay, 1909, President Taft was given a special box with a large chair at the Washington Baseball Stadium at Griffith Field. Now, this was really important because President Taft was a rather large guy. And so, in order to sit there and have fun at the baseball game the whole day, he needed an especially large chair. So what you see here is we start off in 1892, then we jump to 1897. Now it's picking up speed. 1907, TR given the golden ticket. 1908, he invites the Highlanders, who become the Yankees, to the White House. 1909, President Taft given a special box with an extra large seat. And then on April 14th, 1910, the seventh inning stretch was invented. President Taft, who I said was a rather large guy, stood up to get the blood flowing a bit in his extremities and such. And everyone thought that he was leaving the game. He was just getting up to sort of stretch out, and he'd been kind of sitting there for the whole first seven innings, and they thought he was leaving, and so everybody else stood up, and that became the beginning of the seventh inning stretch. And when he sat down, of course, then everybody else sat down. So this was back in a day when people really had a lot of respect, for public officials, and to the point where they, oh my God, you see the president stand up, you stand up. So there you go. That's how it started. 1915, Wilson, who was a big baseball fan and had played center field for his team in college, was the first president to attend a World Series game. And in 1917, 2 years later, FDR threw out the first ball, standing in for President Wilson. So FDR threw the first ball of the season out for the first time in 1917. So remember that. We'll get back to that in a minute. From 1929 to 1932, Hoover attended every one of the opening games of the Washington Senators. Good for you, President Hoover. Maybe you should have been home, I don't know, learning a little economics. But hey, I'm not here to judge. I'm not here to judge. Very good supporting the home team. There you are, sir. And then in 1930, it was reported that Babe Ruth, right, the Babe, was making about $80,000 per year as a professional baseball player, while President Hoover was only making $75,000 a year as president. When a reporter asked Babe Ruth, hey, well, how is it you're making $80,000 a year and the president's only making $75,000 a year? The Babe said, yeah, I know, but I've had a better season than he has. So there you go. All right, then in 1933 to 1945, FDR holds the record for the most opening pitches in the Capitol. So he's throwing out the balls there. And then in 1932, FDR tossed the first ball of the third game at Wrigley Field in Chicago. Anybody know what was important about that game other than FDR throwing out the first ball? Third game, Wrigley, Chicago, 1932. That was the game that the Babe called the shot. So, when he said, oh, I'm going to put it right over there, and off it went, and there it goes. So that brings you up to 1932 when President Roosevelt becomes president. And, a lot of baseball history up to that point. And now let's talk a little bit about FDR and his love of baseball. Now, FDR was a sort of a slight guy. He was not what you'd call athletically built or anything. He enjoyed sports. He enjoyed outdoors types of things. He did horseback riding. We'll talk more about that next month when we're talking about hobbies. He also enjoyed tennis. And he enjoyed a little bit of football, although he wasn't really very, built for that. And he also enjoyed baseball. Now, he loved baseball and enjoyed baseball, but the problem with FDR in baseball is he was a lousy player. He was not a good player at all. So when he goes to Groton and later to Harvard, he becomes involved with the local baseball team, right, the school baseball teams, but only as the equipment manager. So he's not what you'd call exactly, out there on the field making it happen. But if you, as you know, right, if you don't have the equipment, you can't play the game. So pretty important stuff. And then FDR, as I said, loved baseball, couldn't play very well, but loved to be around the game. And he used a lot of baseball metaphors in his speeches and his fireside chats. In fact, if you listen to FDR's speeches and if you listen to FDR's fireside chats, you will find that he mentions baseball and references to baseball almost as many times as he makes references to biblical passages. So he's kind of put those there on the same level somewhat. And he's famous for saying, "No, I have no expectations of hitting a home run every time. Aiming on what I'm doing is aiming at the highest batting average for myself and for the team." So FDR used this as a way to justify to himself and to the American people what it was that he was doing. One of the things that he liked to do was to experiment around with various programs, right? All the New Deal programs, are basically experimental, right? If they work, stick with them. If they don't work, let's get rid of them. And so he didn't expect every single thing that he did to be a home run, but he expected to have a high batting average. And that's exactly what he was looking to do. FDR threw the switch in Washington, D.C., that illuminated the first night game in the big leagues at Crosby Field in Cincinnati in 1935. That was May 24th, 1935. And the game was against the Phillies at that point. And it was a 2-1 game with the home team winning. Woo! Go Cincinnati. So he's in Washington. He throws the light, which illuminates the baseball games, and that's how we end up getting night games. From 1933 to 1941, he tossed out the first ball of opening season, 1933 to 1941, with an overhand throw. And one year, the ball went wild and it hit a Washington Post photographer. Now, on more than one year, it went wild, but this particular year, it hit the Washington Post photographer. And the next year, FDR warned everyone when he tossed the ball out that he'd almost killed a photographer last year. So everybody better take cover. So even when he was throwing out the ceremonial pitch, he still was no good necessarily at baseball. But again, very happy to throw out the first ball, and he did that every year from 33 to 41. A ramp was built at the stadium in D.C. So that FDR was able to visit the games more comfortably and more freely. Of course, he had polio, so it was difficult for him to move around. It was difficult for him to get to place. So they courteously built a ramp for him so that he would be able to get in and out of the stadium more easily, but he very rarely used it. It made him feel very self-conscious. Everybody's at the game, and he's kind of coming in with that awkward walk that he was able to do. Walk where he was sort of be hold on to one of his sons or a military officer, had a cane, and would basically just throw his legs and body forward, catching himself, and he was able to walk very short distances. It was awkward, and he didn't like people looking at him that way. And he said if it weren't for that, and it had been easier to get in and out of the stadium, that he would have certainly attended every game. Okay, that's the kind of fan that he was. Now, in August of 36, FDR believed that baseball was a part of our national heritage, and he pointed this out in a speech. And he condoned baseball as a symbol of America and part of our national heritage because it stressed the basic American values of fair play, clean living, and good sportsmanship. Right now, there's people that would argue some of that stuff today. But think about what the purity of baseball, right? Forget the money aspects, forget the advertising, forget the egos and the attitudes. Think about what the game itself is all about. It's all about fair play. It's all about clean living. It's all about good sportsmanship, right? Getting out there and playing your best, playing your hardest, following the rules, and letting the chips fall where they may. Now, he often placed small bets with his aides and advisors, very small stakes. Maybe 50 cents, maybe cold glass of beer and a hot dog, something like that. He wasn't a big time gambler, and but he did very often have little bets aside with members of his staff and advisors. Keep in mind, he was not playing the game, so he was basically just having some friendly bets there on the side. Now, the big thing that FDR is associated with in terms of baseball is tied to one of the most traumatic things that America has ever experienced, and that, of course, is the attack at Pearl Harbor on December 7th, 1941, a date that will live in infamy, as FDR said. The Japanese Navy and Air Force attacked the naval base at Pearl Harbor in Hawaii on a Sunday morning. And in the course of a little less than 3 hours, 2,400 civilians and American service personnel were killed. In fact, over 1,100 went down and died on the USS Arizona. And so this was a huge shock for the nation. Right, we knew there was a war going on in Europe. With Hitler, he was pouring over the border over there. We thought we were pretty safe. We were negotiating with Japan. We had some tension going on there, but we're trying to bring that down. And then they attack us. Now, all of a sudden, everybody wants to go and get revenge against Japan. And 3 days later, Adolf Hitler declares war on the United States. And so now we are in a two-front war. We are fighting in the Pacific, and we are fighting also in the Atlantic. Now, this was, of course, goes on to become the Second World War. 60 million people killed in this war over the course of the 6 years. And this was really, obviously it's an understatement to say it was a huge deal. But FDR understood what a huge deal it was going to be because he had been Assistant Secretary of the Navy during the First World War. So the question you might ask is, okay, Jeff, what does that have to do with baseball? Well, it has to do with baseball because we are now in a global world war, fighting on two fronts, right? This is twice as big, at least, in terms of complexity, than the First World War, far more complex than the First World War in terms of destruction and deaths and those sorts of things. And so a lot of people were thinking, well, baseball is a great game and, it is, part of our American heritage, but should we really be playing baseball when we're in a world war? Should we really be doing that? If you remember back on 9/11, the week after 9/11 occurred, in New York and in Los Angeles, the comedy shows, the evening, late night comedy shows, failed to air, right? Should we be making fun and should we be joking around after this big national tragedy? Well, the same thing was going on during the Second World War. Can we spare the resources? Can we spare the manpower? How will we be able to post baseball scores on the pages of a newspaper, the same pages that are listing casualties in various battles across the country, right? So the Yankees, won 7-2. Oh, and 4,200 people, were killed in the battle of whatever. So these were the questions that were going on in the minds of folks following the attack at Pearl Harbor. And the baseball commissioner, a guy by the name of Landis, writes FDR a letter asking him what he thinks he should do. Now, I want to share with you that letter. Okay. So he writes a handwritten letter, January 14th, right? 1942. So just a couple of weeks after the attack. So here's the handwritten letter. And I'm going to read you the typed up version. Now I can actually read cursive, which a lot of kids can't do these days. So it's a lost art, but it's coming back now. But it's hard to read the handwritten one. So this is January 14th, 1942. Kenesaw M. Landis, Commissioner of Baseball, to the President of the United States, Franklin D. Roosevelt. Dear Mr. President, the time is approaching when, in ordinary conditions, our teams would be heading for spring training camps. However, inasmuch as these are not ordinary times, I venture to ask what you have in mind as to whether professional baseball should continue to operate. Of course, my inquiry does not relate at all to individual members of this organization whose status in the emergency is fixed by law operating upon all citizens. So in other words, he's not asking for, baseball players to be exempt because he understands we're in a national crisis and the laws, regarding, eligibility to fight in the army are upon everyone, not including baseball players, not exempting them. Normally, we have, in addition to the 16 major teams, approximately 320 minor teams, members of leagues playing in the United States and in Canada. Health and strength to you and whatever else it takes to do this job with great respect. Very truly yours, Kenesaw M. Landis. So there it is, the typed up version. Okay. And here it is, the handwritten version. So the handwritten version came in and they typed it up just to make sure everybody would be able to read. Now, January 14th, 1942, these come in. Okay, the president gets these. And to show you how important this was to President Roosevelt, he responds the very next day, January 15th, 1942. All right, this is so important to President Roosevelt. Less than 24 hours later, and the guy's fighting a world war on two fronts, he sends this letter back to Commissioner Landis. He says, "My dear Judge, thank you for yours of January 14th. As you will, of course, realize, the final decision about baseball season must rest with you and the baseball club owners. So what I am going to say is solely a personal and not an official point of view." So if you are saying, hey, I'm the president of the United States, you're the head of baseball, I'm not going to tell you what to do, but I will give you my opinion. And he goes on to say, I honestly feel that it would be best for the country to keep baseball going. There will be fewer people unemployed, and everyone will work longer hours and harder than ever before. And that means that they ought to have a chance for recreation and for taking their minds off their work even more than before. Baseball provides a recreation which does not last over 2 or 2.5 hours and which can be got for very little cost. And incidentally, I hope that night games can be extended because it gives an opportunity to the day shift to see a game occasionally. Okay, so again, FDR was the guy that illuminated the first night game, and he's saying, these night games are going to be really important because people are working the day shift all day. Once in a while, they got to get out to the ballpark and just forget things for 2.5 hours or so while they, get themselves caught up in the game. As to the players themselves, I know you agree with me that individual players who are of active military or naval age should go, without question, into the services. Even if the actual quality of the teams is lowered by the greater use of older players, this will not dampen the popularity of the sport. Of course, if any individual has some particular aptitude in a trade or profession, he ought to serve the government. That, however, is a matter which I know you can handle with complete justice. Okay, so FDR is saying, hey, you know what? I'm not a particularly good player, and it's still kind of fun for me. So even if we have to play with older players, it's better to go ahead and do this. And it's during this time that the Women's Baseball League really begins to pick up. And did you know that women's baseball leagues actually began at Vassar College, right down there in Poughkeepsie, New York? They were the first to have a baseball team made up of women. It didn't last long; it only lasted 5 or 6 seasons, and then it was considered to be, too grueling for women to play, and they were afraid that the women would get injured, or it would impact them physically and such. So the president then goes on. Here is another way of looking at it. If 300 teams use 5,000 or 6,000 players, these players are a definite recreational asset to at least 20 million of their fellow citizens. And that, in my judgment, is thoroughly worthwhile. With every best wish, very sincerely yours, Franklin D. Roosevelt. So here is the famous letter, and this, ladies and gentlemen, is sometimes referred to as the green light letter. This is the letter that FDR writes back to the commissioner within 24 hours of being asked what should be done. And the president says, you know what, I'm not going to tell you what to do. You're the baseball commissioner, but I think it's a good idea and I think it'll be useful and worthwhile. And so that's what goes on there. And the original of this is the carbon copy. The original of this is in none other than the Baseball Hall of Fame up there in Cooperstown. So next time you're up that way, tell them I sent you. I've done some work with them over the years, and ask them and say, hey, I want to see that baseball, that green light letter, the baseball letter. So the very next day, FDR sends this green light letter, and it's his personal views, not his official views, and he's recognizing that Landis has to make the call. Now, this is a really important thing because Landis and Roosevelt hated each other. All right, they were not at all, admiring of each other. Landis was a diehard, rock-steady Republican, and Franklin Roosevelt, of course, was a liberal Democrat, and they saw very, very differently in terms of their politics. However, what brought them together? The love of the game. Right, the love of the game. So Roosevelt reasons that with the war going on, people are going to need recreation, and a distraction is a good thing. We'll talk again next month when we talk about FDR and his hobbies, how important they were to him, how important hobbies are to you to help break the mental burden of the things that you worry about and think about and work about all day long. And so, in other words, President Roosevelt says, play ball. And baseball was seen as thoroughly worthwhile and thoroughly necessary for the war effort. So again, it almost didn't happen because should we play baseball in a world war? Yes, Roosevelt says go ahead and do it. So baseball was played by very local teams very often, if not, by professionals. Sometimes it was used to raise money for the USO, the United Service Organization, or the Red Cross. And more night games were scheduled so that the day shift folks would be able to go. And this again is should we be using these resources? Yes, absolutely. Now, when other sports got wind of this, right, and oh my goodness, people wrote Landis wrote to the president about baseball, saying, should we play or should we not play? What should we do? Other sports decided that they wanted their own green light letter. And so letters were written to the president from the bowling association, the horse racing industry, and golf. And in all of these instances where they requested a response from the president simply said no. Right? No, I'm not going to, go through every, ping pong, tiddlywinks, that sort of stuff. Baseball needs to go on. I'm endorsing that with the green light letter. Everything else, you make up your own mind. FDR understood that there were few things as American as baseball, and this idea of baseball, apple pie, and mom. And it's interesting if you watch World War II movies, where you got a soldier standing guard and somebody comes up to him and he doesn't know if the guy's a German spy or whatever. Very often the way that they'll trick them up or see how if they are an American or not is to ask them questions about baseball. Who played third base for Cincinnati in the 1928 World Series. I don't even know if they were in the World Series that year, but you'll see that a lot in movies, and that was true. And that was true because baseball was so important. Um, you know, the J.D. Taylor uh, is J.D. Taylor Spink, excuse me, is was a publisher of a thing called Sporting News. And those of you that are old-fashioned baseball fans know that Sporting News was essentially the baseball Bible back in the day. And he was pushing at the time to have FDR honored at the Baseball Hall of Fame by allowing baseball to continue and to doing this endorsement. A guy by the name of J.D. Taylor Spink, and he gives credit to FDR for actually saving the game, and FDR was not included in the Baseball Hall of Fame, but every now and then there'll be a call for him to be inducted into the Hall of Fame. But it hasn't happened just yet. Now, Roosevelt, huge baseball fan, right? President for 12 years, says baseball can continue on, goes to the games whenever he can, throws out the record number of opening pitches. But it wasn't just him that loved baseball. We talked a little bit about some of the guys leading up, Harrison and Taylor and Taft and those guys. But I want to share with you some information and material that I've collected from some of the other presidential libraries showing that their presidents also were very well enamored and much loving of baseball. In fact, interestingly enough, I was on a nationwide meeting with the National Archives last week. And you know how, so there was like over 300 people on this call. And you know how like they do like icebreakers so people, feel more comfortable talking. The question was, who was the first president photographed throwing a pitch from pitcher's mound to home plate? And the answer was Bill Clinton. Went out there and tossed the ball the whole 66 feet to the base. But let's talk about some of these other guys. Babe Ruth, big time baseball player and big time baseball icon, really, writes to the President Harry S. Truman on July 13th, 1948. Here's the picture, right, or the letter right there. The Babe's signature right there. Okay. And the Babe says to the president, "Dear Mr. President, it would make me very happy if you would do me the honor of being my guest at the premiere of the motion picture, The Babe Ruth Story, on Monday evening, July 26th at the Astor Theater. The proceeds of this performance, as well as the premieres in other cities throughout the country, will go to the Babe Ruth Foundation, which will help the kids of America. I do hope you will be able to be with me. Faithfully yours, Babe Ruth." So the Babe is basically inviting the president to go with him to the opening of his life story. Now, this is July 19th, 1948. President Truman writes back to the Babe, and he says, "Dear Babe, I certainly appreciated very much your invitation to attend the premiere of The Babe Ruth Story on July 26th. I regret very much that I will not be possible for me to be present as the Congress meets on that day." So poor Harry Truman has to miss the opening of The Babe Ruth Story with the Babe himself because he's got to tend to business in Washington there with the Congress. But this again shows you how close these guys are to the presidency and how close the presidency is to baseball. And don't let me get off the presentation tonight without telling you my famous baseball joke. Okay, so remind me if I forget. Next up, we have the Honorable Dwight Eisenhower, and he is writing to Don Larson. And he says to Mr. Larson, Don Larson of the New York Yankees, he says, dear Mr. Larson, it is a noteworthy event when anybody achieves perfection in anything. It has been so long since anyone pitched a perfect big league game that I have to go back to my generation of ball players to recall such a thing. Okay, so Don Larson pitches a perfect game. And that is truly a long time ago, says the president. This note brings you my very sincere congratulations on a memorable feat, one that will inspire pitchers for a long time to come. With best wishes, sincerely, Dwight D. Eisenhower. And there's the picture of the letter right there. Okay. Now, this is pretty cool, right? Can you imagine getting a letter from the guy that, I don't know, is president of the United States? Yes, that's cool. But also the guy that was the successful leader of the D-Day invasion in World War II, which brought an end to the Nazis within less than a year of the invasion. And he's writing you a letter saying, "Hey, you did a good job on something." Yeah, look who's talking, Ike. Takes one to know one. So Mr. Larson writes back on October 23rd, 1956, to the Honorable Dwight D. Eisenhower. Dear Mr. President, I can't begin to tell you how much I appreciated your recent letter. And if anyone was to ask me what is the greatest thrill I've ever experienced, I certainly find it difficult trying to decide between the no-hitter and the congratulatory note I received from you. All right, that's pretty cool. My only regret is that I didn't have the privilege of pitching my perfect game with you at hand. I guess that really would have topped everything. My deepest thanks again and warmest wishes that you and your family enjoy continued good health and a long and successful stay in the White House. With kindest personal regards, most sincerely, Don Larson. Okay, so there it is. It's on the Yankees letterhead and everything. Pretty cool stuff, right? So these guys, they don't care what your politics are. They don't care if you're Democrat or Republican. You're a ball player. You're a lover of the game, and that's what's so important about this. Next up, we have a telegram, and this is a telegram that goes to President John F. Kennedy, and it is in response to a letter that John F. Kennedy sent to the chairman of the Jackie Robinson Testimonial Dinner. And so he wasn't able to make the dinner, President Kennedy, but he writes this letter. He says, "I am delighted to join with all who honor Jackie Robinson tonight. He has demonstrated in his brilliant athletic career that man's courage, talent, and perseverance can overcome the forces of intolerance. His election to baseball's Hall of Fame was a great tribute, richly deserved. The vigor, and that Kennedy always liked to say that word. He pronounced it vigor, with great vigor. The vigor and fierce competitive spirit that characterized his performance as an athlete are still evident in his efforts in the great battle to achieve equal opportunity for all people. With best wishes, John F. Kennedy." And so this is a letter, or a telegram letter, that comes from the White House, and it goes to John F. Kennedy. When I peek around there, it's just to make sure that the camera is getting this. I'm not trying to be, I'm not spying on you. Okay, so there you go. And what goes back to him, it says, this is a telegram dispatch that he sends back to the White House. And he says, "Dear Mr. President, on Friday night, July 20th, Jackie Roosevelt Robinson," I didn't even know that, but that's cool, "a great American will be honored at the Waldorf." I'm sorry, this is the invitation. Astoria Hotel in a Hall of Fame dinner commemorating his election to the Baseball Hall of Fame. We would appreciate an appropriate telegram of greeting from your office in honor of the contribution. So this is kind of cool. Robinson's middle name is Roosevelt. I didn't even know that. I mean, I kind of knew it, but I forgot it. So there you go. I wonder who he was named after. Continuing on. Now we're going to jump back a little bit to the president that was president before FDR, but is still in 1956 being courted in terms of baseball accommodations and recommendations. So this says, "Dear Mr. Hoover," and this is from the Cincinnati Ball Club. Okay, and I like their cute little logos up there. The guy with the mustache, like the baseball head and the mustache. Kind of cool. That's probably hand drawn, not computer generated. "Dear Mr. Hoover, yesterday I had the pleasure of talking to a member of your staff, Miss Miller, and she advised that our request of this nature should be handled by correspondence. It is our understanding that in an address you made the following statement, or similar to it. Quote, 'Next to religion, baseball has the greatest moral influence on the people of our country. Our wish is to use this statement and your signature in script. If we are granted this privilege, it will be painted on the wall in right field between our sun deck and the main grandstand at Crosley Field. Okay, so they want to put out this statement that Hoover had allegedly said, or apparently said, that next to religion, baseball has the greatest moral influence on the people of our country, and they want to put it right out there in right field. He goes on to say, I learned from Miss Miller that you do not permit your name to be used commercially, and certainly that is not our wish. We do not advertise on our fences inside the ballpark, and your quotation would not be used as an endorsement of any kind. It's kind of an endorsement of baseball, don't you think? The only commercial advertising in the park is in each concession stand where the advertised item is sold. We have a clock on top of our scoreboard located in left center field. Supporting the clock is a block which Gruen Watch Company has an emblem on it. Across the street from our ballpark, there is a large billboard advertising a number of products, but this is not inside the park. To the best of my knowledge, this would be an innovation in a ballpark, and certainly one that adds considerable dignity to the game. Everyone in baseball is proud and delighted when you mention the game. We are thrilled to know that you are a fan and have such a keen interest in baseball. We will await your decision with great anticipation. And this is John Murdaugh, traveling secretary, Cincinnati Ball Club. Now, this is interesting because what they're basically saying here is, wow, we really respect you, President Hoover, and we respect your love of baseball. And let me just tell you, even though our guy threw Hoover out of office, and I made that little crack earlier about he should be home studying economics, President Hoover was a great man and was a very good president. He was in over his head with the Great Depression. He was a good guy. He was a guy trying to help people. He was a guy trying to get things done, but he just was in over his head. So certainly an admirable fella. And what he does is he ends up sending back to this guy one, two, three, four separate quotes that he's made about baseball. And the one that they end up using is the rigid volunteer rules of right and wrong in sports are second only to religious faith and the moral training, and baseball is the greatest of American sports. Herbert Hoover. So that's the way it appeared on the wall out there at the old ballpark. All right. So again, these guys, they are pretty tight with these presidents. But wait, there's more. And you would have to travel, by the way, to several, like 7 or 8 different presidential libraries to get this information. But I'm bringing it to you here for no cost, all just by sitting down and tuning in, thanks to the great work of our Columbia County Public Libraries. This goes back, so he ends up sending that, and then this guy, John Murdaugh, writes back to President Hoover, and he says, "Dear Mr. Hoover, just a note to express our appreciation for your consent to use a quote from one of your talks at our ballpark. All of us were thrilled to learn that you had consented to our proposal. Under separate cover, we're sending a picture of the painting, which I just showed you a second ago." And then Hoover writes back to Murdaugh, and he says, "Dear Mr. Murdaugh, I would be glad for you to use a quotation from of the import you mentioned in the letter. However, your quotation is not correct." So that was the one he sent back before they ended up painting the one on there. So he got it correct, and he sent them the correct actual quote that they were able to use. Scooching along, we have a letter here to between some correspondence between Stan Musial and Lyndon B. Johnson. Let's see here. It says, so here's Stan Musial, and there's his signature down there at the end. And he sends President Johnson a letter, and he says, "Dear Mr. President, It is with the deepest regret that I submit to you my resignation as a special consultant to the President's Council on Physical Fitness. I've had the honor of serving by appointment for the past 3 years. They have been among the most exciting and important years of my life. Working to improve the physical health of our nation, and particularly to so many young people, has been most rewarding. So, again, this idea of get off the couch, kids, and get out there and play that game. We have received the highest degree of cooperation from your staff, from every department of the government with whom we have worked. The leaders of physical fitness programs in schools and colleges, institutions all over the country have given our program full support. The Advertising Council and many others have aided materially in bringing the need for physical fitness to millions of our citizens. To all of these, we owe a deep debt of appreciation. Without their support, we could not have succeeded. To you, Mr. President, I extend the thanks of all those who have benefited from this program. I am sure the effects will be felt for generations ahead. I have been honored by your appointment and by the opportunity you have given me to have been of service. I wish you the very best of health and success. Stan Musial. Well, there he is. So then President Johnson, right, even though he's working on the Great Society and dealing with the Vietnam War and the Cold War and all that, sends back this letter, January 25th, 1967. And he's got John Lyndon Johnson. He says, "Dear Stan, 3 years is a short time in the life of a nation, yet the three you have served as special consultant to the President's Council on Physical Fitness have been years of large and lasting influence of the American future. So I accept your resignation as tendered with real reluctance. Your leadership has brought fresh strength and spirit to our national life. For the first time, we have truly national priorities and programs directed to higher standards of physical fitness." And let me just say, I was a child going through school at this time, and I was a victim of those attempts to get me to be more physically fit. And I used to tell the gym teacher, "Hey, I'm in shape. Round is a shape," but they didn't buy it. Later on, I went on to use a bodybuilding shampoo. You can see how well that's working. So this is important, this physical fitness stuff. Their impact, your impact in vital measure is evident in all corners of our life and land, in federal initiatives, state laws, partnership with private groups, in schools and colleges, neighborhoods, and homes. And that impact is building. The quality of our lives, the tone and muscle of our society will build these foundations. You should find your greatest satisfaction in that, as I do. We will grow fitter to confront the tests of our years. We will not grow older or weaker before them. You have given given us our youth and health, and taught us to husband their strength. In turn, I give you my pride and gratitude. America gives you its heart. We will be cheering with you in the next chapter of achievement in your life. And so it goes on all the way on up. We can continue on here all the way on up to President Bush. And he was a big baseball player back in his day as well. So where is that one? I had it here a minute ago. Well, I may have left it at work. Anyway, trust me, it goes on all the way on up to current presidents, including as I said, Bill Clinton, who threw the first ball out. Actually, it's one thing to throw it out into the field and then they start playing, but actually threw it from mound to home plate. And so there you have it, right? The national pastime, baseball, America's national heritage, the game by which we help to define our nation. Now today, of course, there's many other sports that compete for our attention, but baseball has been a pillar in the presidency in terms of allowing for recreation, allowing for inspiration, and allowing for a demonstration of those good old-fashioned American values of hard work, teamwork, patience, clean living, and good sportsmanship. So let me see, are there any questions or comments?
Hey, George, you can unmute yourself and talk if you'd like.
Hi, George. Go ahead, George. You're on the air.
I think you're unmuted now.
Are you there, George?
You can put your question in the chat if you.
Maybe he's doing a seventh inning stretch and just stepped out for a minute.
This.
We'll see if he comes back in a second. Hey, meanwhile, while we're waiting for George, if he's going to ask a question, let me tell you my baseball joke. You want to hear my baseball joke? And if you've heard this before, don't spoil it. So there's this guy, right? And he's got this dog, and the dog can talk. And so he goes into this bar with the dog, and he says to the bartender, "Hey, I got the world's only talking dog. And if I can prove that to you, can the dog and I drink here tonight for free?" And the bartender says, "Well, anytime you come in here with a dog that can talk, of course you can drink for free. That's pretty unusual, but I got to see some evidence first, right? That this dog can actually talk." So the guy says to the dog, "Hey, dog, what do you get when you what do you say when you sit on some sandpaper?" And the dog goes, "Rough." Right? And so the guy says, "Oh, there it is. He talked, right? He answered my question." And I'm like, "Hey, that's not really a question. Any dog could have done that. Anybody could have done that. That's not good." So he says, "All right, well, let me ask him another question." So he asks the dog a second question, and the question that he asks the dog there is, "What do you find on the top of a house? What do you find at the top of the house?" And he asks the dog, and the dog says, "Roof." Right. So the guy says, "Oh, there he is. He talked. He answered my question. Right. What's on top of a house? There's a roof." And he answered the other one, "Rough." So we'll take a couple of beer. And the guy says, "Wait a minute. Wait a minute." And those are lucky guesses. Those are lucky guesses. So let me ask you this. I want to ask him one more question. And so the guy asked the dog, he says, "All right, I'm going to ask you this question." He says, "Who was the greatest baseball player of all time?" Right? And the dog goes, right, as in Babe Ruth. And the guy says, That's it. You're out of here." He picks them up, picks up the dog, picks up the guy, throws them out into the snow. And when they hit the snowbank, the dog turns to the guy and he says, "DiMaggio?" There you go. All right. So, George was correcting me. Enjoyed your presentation, but Clinton threw the ball 60 feet, 6 inches, not 66 feet. Oh, thank you for the correction, George. That would be, let's see, 5.5 feet short, or 5.5 feet long from what I had said over the actual distance. Thank you for correcting me on that. Any other questions, comments, snide remarks? All right. You can use that joke, by the way. It's in the public domain, so you could use that, and I know some of you probably groaned and rolled your eyes, but I also know by tomorrow this time, you'll probably have told that joke to at least two other people. So don't try to, trick me. I know what you're doing with that stuff. We will see you again next month. Thank you for tuning in, and please take some time to watch a baseball game. Okay, things are so crazy right now. Things are so happening out there in our lives and in our world that you owe it to yourself to sit down and lose yourself in America's pastime. Lose yourself in a game. The presidents would want you to do that. That's how they help to relax. That's how we relaxed during the Second World War. Treat yourself to a good old fashioned baseball game. And we'll see you next month.